The King's Ballad, Part 1. Zitra, the land of the brave, a haven for adventurers far and wide. It promised riches and glory, offering plenty to those whom she deemed worthy. Like many others seeking to mark their names in the lands, a man arrived in this land many years ago with little more than 20 cyros. Fear of poverty did not deter this man, as his lust for battle far outweighed his flesh's desire for sustenance. This man's rage-fueled and fierce desire to become the strongest being in the world thrust him neck-deep into the hairiest of situations, but he always found a way to beat the odds and emerge the victor. Some would find it ironic that the happiest moments of this man's life all came in the midst of battle. From the elder dragons of Scrimdor to the famous murderers of Zatanna, he had seen them all, beat them all, and now there was nothing left that he could challenge. Now and then, an adventurer would show up to challenge him. Sadly, none could match his strength, and the fights never lasted long enough for him to take any real pleasure. Empty. That was his sole emotion. He needed something more, something to ignite once again his thirst. Unfortunately, this was a wish the land of Zitra could grant no longer. At the center of Zitra sat a massive dark forest called the Forest of Dreza, home to all manner of demons. Patrons in taverns, kings in palaces, and warriors in their strongholds all recognized this place as the most dangerous place in all of Zitra. However, one hidden rule of Zitra was that wherever danger thrived, there was also considerable profit to be made. The Forest of Dreza was no different. High-level mana beasts guarded impressive caches and treasures capable of transforming frogs into princes overnight. Despite knowing the risk, men and women were driven to challenge the forest by greed, lofty ideals, dreams, and even love. They all believed they would be the one to return home with enough riches to completely change their lives. Unfortunately, the Forest of Dreza was not so generous with its gifts. Only 1 in every 10 people that entered the forest returned, the numbers adding up to the horde of undead that forever haunted the land. Located at the center of the abominable forest was a mountain that peaked past dark clouds that forever blocked Dreza's sky. This hill was nicknamed Oni Hill by adventurers because of the several demons that made it their home. It once housed the great demon king, but he lost his life to the current occupant of the castle, a man feared in all the realms for his cruelty, the harbinger of chaos, Raznik Yaturlo. Deep within Oni Hill, a magnificent throne constructed entirely from bones sat on the cold stage overlooking a dreary black throne room. Floating balls of light called mage lights illuminated the room, revealing its occupants. 2 skeleton death knights, a skeleton archmage, and a red-haired young man who looked to be in his late 20s. The 3 skeletons drew a stark contrast to the man who stood in front of the wall behind the throne. One was over 2 meters tall and donned a full set of high-level bronze armor. The hilts and blades of 2 swords as tall as he was poked out from behind a tattered cape. The second Death Knight looked to be a hybrid between beast and man. Its 4 arms were crossed on its chest. Its 4-meter-long tail curled around it. The second Death Knight had a skinny build, and rather than armor, its bones formed a hard, impenetrable shell. The skeleton archmage wore a standard mage's robe and held a large staff which used a human skull as its focusing orb. Silence reigned in the throne room as the skeletons watched the man dip a brush into one of the many small pots rotating around him. Satisfied with the color, he proceeded to update the painting on the wall.
I always thought Lord Raznik hated paintings,
the second Death Knight, Saphir the Swift, murmured, breaking the silence. It had a shrill voice that slightly echoed its words. Lord Raznik does not hate paintings, the first skeleton, Rosios the True, refuted. It had a hoarse voice akin to that of a 60-year-old man. He hates the act of painting. Explicitly, he hates painting himself, the skeleton archmage, Conwith the Damned, emphasized. Saphir the Swift used its tail to scratch its head.
Then why is he painting now? He has been on that thing for 2 days already.
Rosios the True and Conwith the Damned shared a look. A depressed atmosphere descended as both skeleton warriors looked at the naive Saphir. That is because the time has come. In the end, Rosios the True was the one who spoke up.
Time?
Saphir the Swift muttered. The time has come for Lord Raznik to leave our side, Konowit the Damned explained, his voice uncharacteristically hollow. Thus, the Lord chose to indulge in something he would normally never do. Saphir the Swift was even more confused.
Why would Lord Raznik leave us?
Konowit the Damned tightly gripped his staff to control his tumbling emotions. Once again, Rosios the True provided an answer. The Lord has a task he must fulfill.
Ah, I see.
Saphir the Swift nodded.
You guys scared me for a moment there. When will he return?
You dare to question the Lord's time? Flames burst out of Konowit the Damned's eye sockets as he heavily reprimanded Saphir.
Sorry.
Saphir the Swift apologized. The Lord will return when he wishes, Rosios the True stated, promptly reducing the tension. Saphir, it is right to miss the Lord's presence. There is no need for apologies.
Okay, so he will return like always. You guys should not have gotten me so worried in the first place.
Rosios the True and Konowit the Damned once again shared a look between themselves. Yes, like always, the Lord will return. They are here. A deep voice boomed, carrying in it an authority that could not be disputed by any living being. The three undead generals shuddered as the brush in the hands of Raznik Yaturlo fell to the ground. A series of loud cracking sounds echoed in the halls as the pots fell to the ground and shattered. The man swiped his hand in the air. The seemingly benign action caused a small screen to appear in front of him. He rapidly clicked on a few options, and a pillar of light surrounded him. Moments later, the light disappeared to reveal a terrifying black full-plated armor. The skull motif and the dense dark aura effusing from the armor harkened memories of the previous Demon King. Raznik Yaturlo turned around, his face hidden behind a grotesque helmet that had wrought terror and trauma in countless hearts across the plains. The combination of the mask and armor granted him the nickname Demon King of Dreza, coined by a famous bard. The Demon King solemnly regarded his constituents. What a joke. Who would believe that the Demon King only had 3 soldiers at his command? Yet this was the reality. Raznik granted the demons and undead under the previous Demon King their freedom when he slew the former Demon King. Ever since, the number of beings in Oni Hill drastically reduced over time until there were only 3 left. These final 3 warriors had refused to leave the hill, and Raznik let them do whatever they wanted. Who would have thought that these 3 would be the faces he would see at a time like this? My lord, there are over 500 warriors on the ground floor, Konowit the Damned reported. They have just begun the battle with the fodder skeletons. 500, Raznik repeated. As I thought, this is not the location. My lord? Nothing, Raznik said with a wave of his hand. Go and welcome the guests. I will be at the peak. He looked at Rosios the True and Saphir the Swift. Rosios, Saphir, battle to your heart's content. Rosios the True clasped his hand to his chest and bowed. As you desire, my lord. Your wish is my command, Saphir stated, and with a flash, it disappeared from the room. Rosios the True watched as Raznik made his way over to an exit on the east side of the throne room. As always, the great Demon King cut a solitary figure, marching towards a future only he could see. Something inside Rosios snapped. My lord. Raznik paused and turned to look at the general. What is the matter? Will you return to us? Rosios the True resisted the temptation to voice his thoughts. Instead, he shook his head and said, Nothing, my lord. See you soon. Rosios tapped his foot against the earth and a small mandala formed under him. A pillar of light shot up from the mandala and shrouded his figure. Moments later, the teleportation matrix sent him out of the throne room. If it is alright with you, I would like to remain here, Konowit the Damned said. Do what you want, Raznik replied and turned around. The mage lights dimmed, ultimately shutting off as the Demon King made his way out of the throne room. Within seconds, the throne room plunged into darkness. The exit Raznik took led to a stone staircase hewn into the surface of the Oni Hills. Raznik looked down at the dark forest with mirth as he ascended the stairs. How long had it been since he had laid eyes on anything else? Months? Years? The Demon King could not be certain. In years past, Raznik often ventured into dangerous realms in search of enemies to fight. He would then return to his mountain to rest before leaving for another conquest. Its barren walls used to be home. Then one day, he ran out of enemies to fight. One day, he returned from a conquest without finding a single foe worthy of fighting. That day turned 2. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. At one point, Raznik finally admitted the horrible truth he had been avoiding. There were just no longer any beings he could challenge. He was officially and unequivocally the strongest being alive in all of the realms. Becoming the strongest should have been a point of celebration for the Demon King, especially as it was a dream millions of adventurers strove towards. Unfortunately, for this Demon King, the goal should have remained just that, a goal. His entire existence relied on the journey to become the strongest. Now that he was, where was he supposed to go from there? Ever since he admitted the truth to himself, Raznik cooked himself in Oni Hill like a good Demon King. The occasional challenger did pop up now and then, destined heroes with their magic swords, or famous mercenaries looking for a quick buck. Unfortunately, none managed to excite the Demon King. He dispatched the few that made it past the Death Knights with ease. Raznik could feel the walls of Oni Hill that once felt like home closing in on him, as if wallowing in his solitude. Luckily, Oni Hill's walls were not all there was to the mountain. Raznik finally ascended to the peak and was greeted with a stunning sight, despite the lack of sunlight. A small garden with an assortment of flowers, most of which were planted by him, decorated the path he followed from the mountainside to a glass marble throne that sparkled ever so magnificently when the sun rose. A small lake glistened under the moonlight, with the most beautiful fish living freely in it. Unbeknownst to most, this lake's water was made entirely from the rebirth elixir. A small bottle of this elixir could pass for millions of Cyros, yet it was being used to raise fish by the wasteful Demon King. Indeed, it was a spot for the king of the land. But it would not be his after today. After today, none of this would matter. Raznik sighed as he walked past the pond and arrived at the marble throne. Resting on the side of the throne was a buster sword so large many had asked how he managed to wield it, let alone swing it the way he did. Raznik handcrafted the sword himself, much like every weapon in his infamous 12 series. He had used metals from the depths of Groknir, the land of the savage dwarves and flames of the elder dragons, pouring all of his desires for greatness and power into every strike of the hammer. The black masterpiece had been born from the embers of the dying flames. Raznik personally picked the skull that adorned the hilt from the king of dragons' feeding grounds. Raznik picked up the sword and sat on the throne. He balanced the blade on his legs and leaned into the throne. He shut his eyes, reveling in the silence that followed. The night wind brought with it memories of his past, his time training at level 0. He had spent over 2 years learning proper combat techniques from every martial school in the major cities you could find. Raznik often wondered how people would react if they knew he didn't pass level 1 for over 6 months while remaining in the first city. He had spent that whole time training in combat schools, his only source of income the pittance he earned from helping the artisans in the town. It had been a long, dull, and arduous period, but it served as the foundation for the legends that would later rise. People often envied the finished work, but rarely considered the blood, sweat, and tears needed to get to that point. Crunch. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted Raznik's journey into memory lane. The Demon King opened his eyes and saw a lock of brown hair slowly rising at the end of the path. As it rose, it revealed the owner to be a young mage in his late teens. He was dressed like a traditional mage in a blue gown and held a staff whose power even the Demon King respected. Raznik's mind traveled to the 3 skeleton knights who always awaited his return. So, they fell. Impressive, the Demon King acknowledged. It must not have been easy to defeat the Guardians. You must be proud of yourself. From your appearance, I presume the rest of your party died in the mountains? To this taunt, the mage did react in the form of a wince. Over 500 of his companions perished against the 3 skeletons. It was a miracle he wasn't traumatized. Seemingly oblivious to the mage's troubles, Raznik said with a solemn gaze in the depths of which smoldering embers silently burned. A small price to pay. Raznik cleared his thoughts and stood up. He balanced the buster sword on his shoulder and strolled towards the mage. Now then, your party lays dead behind you and you cannot possibly hope to beat me on your own. So, what is it you desire? Gold? Power? Fame? I will grant you that which you desire as your reward for making it this far. A handshake, the mage replied, barely above a whisper. Pardon? A handshake, the mage repeated with an embarrassed yell. Ho, a fan then. Raznik sighed with a tinge of disgust in his voice. Fine then, he replied and stretched out his hand. It's an honor, the mage acknowledged with a bow and grasped Raznik's armored hand with his. Right then, a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes, followed closely by a grin just as, if not more grotesque than the Demon King's. Realization dawned upon the Demon King, but before he could react, the mage screamed, Long-distance teleportation! Long-distance teleportation was one of the most useful skills in Zitra, but it could only be used on oneself. To use on an ally or friend required a high-level transmutation skill or an appropriate item. To use on an enemy, however, required a mastery of the conjuration field of magic. Adventurers rarely use long-distance teleportation outside of transportation because of its many restrictions. Some of these restrictions included body contact. Teleportation takes both you and your target, and worst of all, the lengthy spell required to cast it on an enemy. Raznik had seen it used a few times for suicide missions. Users would transport an enemy into the skies with them. They would then both plunge to their deaths. However, if this mage thought he could kill the Demon King like this, he had severely underestimated Raznik's abilities. Raznik watched a rotating blue light envelope his body and braced himself for the journey. With a flash, nothing remained of where they once stood. The clearing fell into a deathly silence as the last rays of the sinking sun disappeared, drowning the mountain in still darkness. Below the peak, individual mage lights occasionally blinked, shedding the tiniest of light on a massive painting that spanned the throne room's four walls. 3 different colored will-o-wisp lights appeared in the darkness and floated to the back of the throne, where they would burn eternal. Several miles away, a small, soft blue light appeared in a large field bearing terrible scars of a battle once fought here. The field never recovered from the harsh treatment, and the only vestiges of the once beautiful land were pockets of grasses scattered across the scorched earth. At the center of this field, the blue light pulsated like a heartbeat, then rapidly expanded, taking on the form of 2 men. It softly dissipated, revealing the Demon King and his captor, their hands still tightly clasped. The mage fell to his knees, exhaustion evident on his sweat-drenched face. The fatigue was yet another drawback of the teleport skill. It rendered its user incapable of further movement for a few minutes. It also drained all the mana from whoever cast it, no matter how large his or her mana might be. It was, for all intents and purposes, a suicide option to use it, which was why it mildly surprised the Demon King to see he was not in the sky or above some volcano. Where are? Raznik started to ask, but the question died in his throat. He recognized the field in which they had landed. Nostalgia flooded him like a wave as he recalled the epic fight he participated in on this field. Yes, this was where it all began. It was only fitting that this be the final battlefield. Child, your life shall cease now, Raznik said to the young mage whose hand he still held tightly. But, as a just reward for your bravery, I shall grant thee this staff, he said with a smile as a white oak staff materialized in his hand. Wield it well. The Staff of Ide has a monstrous power even I found hard to control, but I am sure it will not prove too difficult for one such as you. The mage weakly reached out and accepted the weapon, immediately feeling his body grow stronger once his hand made contact. He did not have time to relish his new staff because a black mass immediately blocked his vision. To the circle, he returns, whispered Raznik as the mage's body dissipated into petals of light, which softly flowed upwards towards the blackened sky. They both knew, however, that this was not actual death. Those marked by the goddess, as he once was, had the gift of immortality. When killed, they would be reborn in one of her temples. Raznik lost that gift when he rebelled against her, which in turn turned him into the most wanted man in the land. What do you have planned for me? the Demon King mused as he surveyed the field once known as the Valley of Kiel. The Valley of Kiel was once the battleground, or more correctly, the Colosseum for the Parians. The Parians were a nation of giants which, when not waging war with itself, terrorized its neighboring towns. The giants loved to watch the battles fought in the valley from the towering cliffs that bordered the valley. Years passed. A decree had been sent out for all adventurers to find a way to stop the tyranny of the giants. The current Demon King was but a young adventurer back then. In his first real conquest, he challenged Roth, overlord of the giants, to a duel. After a long and terrible battle, Raznik emerged victorious, shocking the world. Raznik then used his privilege as the new overlord of the giants to guide them across the ocean to a different land where they could rampage to their heart's content. The battle put his name in the ears of every adventurer, noble, and even gods. Most of them sought him out to further their agendas, unwittingly granting him even more power, until, eventually, he became far too powerful. Such is the fate of the strong. A change in atmosphere snapped the Demon King out of his reverie. Fog began to rise from the mountains around him. It coiled its way around the field with a sinister hiss, increasing in height and thickness as it did so. The fog formed a circle around him, making it so he could no longer see the mountains. The formless beast rose even higher and arched in around him until it cut off his view of the clouds. As if recognizing its prey was captured, it abruptly plunged downwards and rapidly engulfed him. A silhouette formed in the mist as Raznik, unfazed by the strange fog, drove his sword into the earth.
Demon King Raznik Uterlo,
the silhouette calls with the voice of a mature woman.
You have been charged with a treason against the Zitrian Empire. What say you in your defense?
Raznik bellowed with exaggerated amusement. His helmet warped the sound of his voice into a deep, sinister laugh akin to 1,000 demons.
What amuses you so?
The silhouette asked. Treason against the Zitrian Empire? Raznik challenged with a chuckle. Surely you jest, he asked, disgust and anger evident in his voice.
You were tasked with destroying the Demon Clan. Instead, you chose not only to side with them, but also deigned to attack your fellow adventurers. What is that if not treason?
What gives you the right to decide if an entire race lives or dies?
The goddess Aethia, giver of life, ordered it so.
What consequences does that hold? Are you saying the gods cannot be wrong? Or perhaps you believe Aethia may take a life because she offered it? The woman in the fog seemed not to have an answer to his question. Raznik continued in a lighter tone. It matters not, does it? Our words, thoughts, and methods are completely different. Nothing I say will get through to you, nor will anything you say get through to me. There is only one way for people like us to communicate truly. Raznik brandished his sword with apparent enthusiasm.
It is regrettable. I had hoped we could resolve this peacefully. I suppose this is a fitting end for Raznik the Destroyer,
the silhouette said wistfully. How about we begin? Raznik declared as he swung his sword in an arc. A massive shockwave instantly scattered the fog. Oh, this is quite the reception, Raznik stated as he surveyed the once empty field. Adventurers of all races had already surrounded him, their approach masked by the fog that had settled in earlier, their numbers easily arranged in the millions, and most of them looked strong enough to give him trouble.
This is not a reception, Demon King,
the silhouette's voice called from one of the surrounding cliffs. The voice was revealed to belong to a woman who looked to be in her late 20s. Hair the color of snow flooded in the night breeze, underneath which a pair of cold blue eyes glared at the Demon King. Adorned in a white robe and matching headgear, the woman was a true figure of matchless beauty.
This is your funeral, she corrected as she raised her left arm.
For one such as I to be sent off by so many, this is truly an honor. His sword dematerialized, and a pair of blood-red swords with chains that wrapped around his arms took its place.
Do not flatter yourself,
she scolded, and brought down her arm. Like a bolt of lightning running through metal, a frenzy arose in the warriors around Raznik. The intensity of the excitement increased the closer they were to the Demon King. A flurry of arrows, spears, balls of fire, and ice tore through the air, their target the lone warrior in the middle. Ah, so it begins. Raznik laughed as he whirled his swords around him. With a cry of defiance, he slammed his swords onto the earth. Cracks instantaneously appeared in the ground around him, out of which pillars of flame erupted. These flame pillars destroyed or blew away every last projectile. The sight of Rasnik's black armor amid the pillars of flame, strolling ever so slowly towards them, sent a chill up the spines of everyone. Monster was the word on the lips of everyone present as the Demon King lunged at them. Hi, this is Score, and this has been part 1 of Chapter 1 of the Parallel series. I hope you all enjoyed.